Growing up, my life was perfect. And my dad and uncle were my role models since they owned the fanciest restaurant in the city. And while they were busy working, my favorite cousin and I were always having a good time together. Hey, Tyler, how about a game of Battleship? You know, I'm going to beat you up again. Actually, in our entire school, Tyler was the best at the game. But this time, while we were playing, he received a call. While on the call, I could tell that Tyler was in some kind of trouble. The truth was, he was always getting into trouble, but I could tell this one was a big mess. Just give me a few hours. I'll sort it out, please. When he was done with his phone call, I asked him if everything was okay. Yeah, everything's fine. I just have some errands to run. I'll be back this evening. Please don't tell my dad I'm leaving. Okay, I guess. Later that evening, I heard noises from the living room, and when I went down to check, I saw my dad and Tyler's dad, Uncle Tom, in a heated argument. Dad, Uncle Tom, what's going on here? Nothing, son. Go to your room. Nothing? How would you explain this missing money when it has your name all over it? You stole over 100 million from our company, and now you're denying it? What? My eyes popped out of their sockets after I overheard my uncle. $100 million? That was just unbelievable. I told you, I didn't do it. I swear. Well, that's useless to me right now. The two of you need to leave this house this minute. It all felt like a dream until I saw some men rolling our luggage out of the mansion. Hey guys, my name is Brian, and this is my story. That night, we moved into a much smaller house that had no windows and plenty of rats. For the first time, I knew what being poor felt like. The next week, I saw Tyler at school and rushed over to greet him. But instead of sounding like the normal Tyler I knew, he sounded so cold. What do you want from me? You're my best friend, and I wanted to talk to you. Then talk. You have 7 seconds. I couldn't sleep last night. Our new house is terrible. Please talk to your dad. There has to be a way to work this out. Time's up. Brian, I almost cried listening to your sad story. Just that I don't care. But you're my best friend. Maybe if your dad wasn't such a thief and a green snake under a green grass, I would have decided to help. Take that back. Right now. Or else what? Would you call your dad to come steal my voice too? That was the last straw. I became so mad at Tyler for his mean jokes that I didn't take up to 3 seconds before I pounced on him, and we began a rumble. But just then, a teacher walked in on us and separated us.
Detention! Both of you!
We ended up spending the whole day in detention, and I became even angrier with Tyler. When I got home after school, I walked in on my dad crying over a plate of food. And when I went to check if he had some food left in the fridge, it was as empty as the Sahara. Why is this happening to us? What's the problem, Dad? Why is everything scattered? That's the last of the food we have. I brought out some cans from last night to check if there was any leftovers for us to eat, but there isn't. I felt my heart shatter into a million pieces as Dad cried, and it made me lose my appetite immediately. Everything will be fine, Dad. I woke up super early the next morning so I could catch the first bus to Uncle Tom's office. When I got there, I was glad he stopped everything he was doing and gave me his whole attention. How can I help you, Brian? Okay, so I know you're angry with Dad, but things are really hard for us. And I need a job. I can help out as the chef in the family restaurant. Please. Well, Brian, I'll give you the job, only because you're a responsible kid, and a son any man would dream of having. Please don't do anything that'll ruin our relationship, okay? Yes, Uncle. Thank you, Uncle. You'll report at the restaurant after school tomorrow, then prepare your best dish for me and other chefs to taste, okay? Dad, what's going on here? Why are you smiling with that son of a thief? Watch it, boy. Brian is still family. The next day, I got off school pretty early so I could start prepping for my interview. I served them the food and waited for Uncle Tom's response. I loved the soup. Although it's peppery, I loved the chicken too. I must confess, I am impressed. I thought Tyler would be happy for me, but instead he looked so angry and blurted out, "How can you be impressed with this ugly and tasteless chicken?" You're not the judge here, Tyler. Sit down. You got the job, son. Congratulations. Thank you, Uncle. Thank you very much. I was so happy and couldn't wait to get home and tell Dad all about my new job. But when I got home, Dad interrupted my good news. I need to tell you something, Brian. I took my seat and listened as Dad continued. So, you know we lost everything, and we're broke now. I don't think it's a great idea that you continue in a private school. And that's why tomorrow I'll be withdrawing you from that school, so you can attend a public school that's more affordable for us. But I'm sorry, son. I felt so hurt after Dad was done talking, but I still tried convincing him. I got a job as a chef. I could take some money from my paycheck to support myself in school. Dad had already made up his mind, and the next day I dreaded going back to school because I knew it was my last. And as I was packing out my books from the locker, I heard Tyler's voice from behind me. Looks like the trash is finally taking itself out. I don't know what has come over you, Tyler, but you need to fix yourself, or else I'll do that for you. Whatever. Hurry up and leave before you steal the whole school and hide it in your pocket. What a jerk! I was milliseconds away from throwing a punch at Tyler's face when my dad intervened. Brian, let it go. That's right. Listen to your poor daddy. Watch your mouth, boy. Whatever. What can you do? You're just a thief who stole my dad's money. At this point, I was so fed up with Tyler and his rude comments. But before things got more intense, Dad pulled me away. And for some reason, he wasn't happy that I stood up to Tyler. When we got home that day, Dad said he had something to tell me. I know you don't like the way Tyler treats you, but I need you to ignore him the best you can. But it's so hard to, Dad. I understand. But if you kill him with kindness, Tyler would only realize he's wasting his time. Engaging in a fight with him would only get you into trouble. When I showed up at work, I saw Tyler already waiting at the restaurant. I acted like I hadn't seen him.
Excuse me, sir. Please take your legs off the table.
What? Do you know who I am? You know what? You're fired. Get out now. And just like that, the little psycho fired a cleaner for no sensible reason at all. I tried my best from that day onwards to ignore Tyler totally, for good. One day, after a long day at work, I had to take the trash out because Tyler had fired all the cleaners. And while I was outside, I saw some boys spray painting a car. I rushed over to stop them, but when they saw me, they sped away, faster than lightning. But before I could throw one of their spray cans at them, I heard a voice behind me. Brian, what are you doing? What? Why would you do this to my car? No, I didn't do this. Some boys did. How do you explain the spray can in your hands? I hate the new Tyler, but you know I'd never do this to you. Oh, please. Stop with the acting. We both know you'd do just anything to get back at me. After that, Tyler just stormed back into the restaurant angrily. He rushed straight into Uncle Tom's office, since this was his chance to make me look bad. Oh, please. Stop with the acting. We both know you'd do just anything to get back at me. After that, Tyler just stormed. Ryan has been working all day. I'm sure he's innocent. When Uncle Tom sided with me, Tyler was furious and actually threatened me. I'll make your life so miserable. Trust me. True to my psycho cousin's words, the next day, Tyler came into the restaurant and ordered for a bowl of soup. And when it was brought to him, he started screaming like he'd just seen a ghost. Who made this soup? I did. What's wrong? Ew, do you want to kill me? I didn't order for some hair soup. Why does this soup have hair in it? I didn't do this. Why would I even try to ruin a food I cooked? Because you're jealous. I have everything that you don't have. That's enough, Tyler. There are surveillance cameras all over this place, and I'll get to the root of it. Minutes later, Uncle Tom accessed the surveillance tapes from the camera archives, and we were shocked to see Tyler putting his own hair in his soup. Why does this tape show you cutting your hair and putting it in your soup? Eric made me do it. Who's Eric? The other guy in my head? He makes me do crazy stuff against my will? Tell Brian you're sorry. You should be ashamed of yourself for trying to ruin your cousin's image. I'm sorry. I guess. It's fine. You're my best friend. And also, I'm getting kind of used to this mean version of you. Ryan, I'm so sorry. Please forgive your cousin. And just then, Uncle Tom handed me a check of $1.2 million. Take this as my profound apology. Thank you so much, Uncle. I was so happy. So after my shift, I decided to surprise my dad with some new clothes, since most of our clothes were now worn out and faded. But on my way back home, I saw some boys cornering another boy, and I was far from surprised when I heard Tyler's voice coming from that direction. What a meanie. I rushed over to see what was going on, but my jaw dropped to the ground when I saw those same boys that were ruining Tyler's car with Tyler. And this time, Tyler was in a vulnerable spot. I cleared my throat dramatically, and the boys turned around. What's the problem here? Just scoot away. This is none of your business. I was about to leave, but Dad's advice flashed back into my head. Kill Tyler with kindness. So instead of leaving him in trouble, I stayed to defend him. Tyler is my best friend and my cousin. His problems are also mine. Tell me, what did he do wrong? Well, since you want to be a hero, your dumb cousin here owes us $1.5 million, and we need our money today. Wait, what? Is that true? The tears in Tyler's eyes made my heart break, and I felt sad for him. Fine, I'll pay the money. If I can only pay $1 million today, then I'll pay the rest tomorrow. So I gave the bad boys the check Uncle Tom had just given me to cash out the remaining $1 million in it. See you tomorrow, superhero. Tyler owed me a whole lot of explanation, so when those boys disappeared, I turned straight to Tyler. What happened? How come you owed those boys that much? I'm a bad luck, Brian. Everywhere I go, bad things happen to me. Don't say that. Please, keep this as a secret between us. I borrowed some money from them and invested it into a business, but it turned out to be a scam. Why would you do that? Because every time Dad comes home, he keeps talking about how ambitious and serious-minded you are. I thought if I could invest some millions, I could earn more millions, and maybe for the first time, Dad would be proud of me. Hey, he is your dad, and he will always love you and be proud of you. I hugged Tyler as he cried like a 2-year-old baby, and for the first time in a while, I felt the real Tyler was back. The next day, I took all the money from my savings and met those boys as I'd promised. It's complete. Thank you so much. I owe you. Well, dang right he did. But minutes later, Tyler said something interesting. I know things have been hard for me, and you just paid my debts with your savings, but I can repair our dad's relationship. All I need you to do is convince your dad to come to a father-son date with you at the community park tomorrow by 4 p.m. Convincing Dad to agree to a father-son date was a no-brainer, and I couldn't wait to see if Tyler's plan was going to work. The next day, by 4 p.m., Dad and I were already at the park. I waited for Tyler's signal before taking the blindfolds off. Ta-da! But when Dad's eyes jammed Uncle Tom's, Dad turned into a literal dragon. Why would you bring me to this man? Chill out, Dad. I've been working for Uncle Tom this whole while, and I never wanted to tell you because I knew you'd overreact, like you're doing now. I should have known something was wrong when Tyler asked me for a father-son date. I brought the two of you here to say something. Immediately, we all stopped talking and gave Tyler our attention. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Uncle. And I'm so sorry, Brian. I know who stole the $100 million from the company. Who did? It wasn't Brian or his dad. It was me. My jaw disconnected from my mouth when I heard Brian admit to stealing the company's money. You did what? Please, Dad, forgive me. I betted all the money away. I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you, but I knew you'd be so mad. That was why I set Brian's dad up. I felt a rush of emotions as Tyler spoke and was about to jump on him and give him the beatings of his life, but Dad held me. I'm so sorry, Uncle. Brian, please, forgive me. But instead of blurting out angrily, Dad held my hand and stood up. You should be ashamed of yourself for trusting an ordinary paper without doing thorough research. I'm so sorry, little brother. Please, forgive me. Dad and I stormed out of the park angrily and decided to cut connections with Uncle Tom and Tyler for good. After almost 1 month of staying away from Uncle Tom and Tyler, I saw them one morning in front of our house. I still hadn't forgiven Tyler and was about to rush back inside when I heard Uncle Tom speak. Brian, please don't leave. You've always been a smart boy and have always taken the right decision since I knew you. Tom, leave us alone. We don't want your help anymore. Come inside, Brian. But I was really interested in what Uncle Tom had to say, so I stayed. Tyler was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder when he was 4, and the doctor asked me to seek help for him, but I never did. I didn't want to lose him the way I lost his mom, so I kept him. That's why every time he reported you to me, I didn't flinch, because I knew it was all his mental disorder. Please, forgive me. Please. I felt sad for Tyler and Uncle Tom, so I rushed to hug them. I'll be taking Tyler to the best facility so he can get help for his mental health. I'll step down as the company's head so I can take care of Tyler. Please, brother, come back to us. I was so happy when Dad came over and joined in the hug.
I continued to knock on the door until I heard deep growls coming from behind me. I grabbed Tay's arm. Did you hear that?
I didn't hear any.
Tay stopped mid-sentence as the volume of the growls increased. We both pressed our backs against the hut as 2 tigers slowly emerged from the bushes.
Help! Somebody help us!
Tears rolled down my cheeks and my body trembled. Was this how I was going to die? Pulled by tigers? Hi, my name is Atisha and I'm from Nepal. Please like and subscribe.
Atisha, just the intern I wanted to see.
I walked into Mr. Mandal's office. Mr. Mandal, how can I be of assistance?
There's this wild man who's been living and surviving in the wilderness for years. I need you to find this man and paint him to be the most uncivilized man you've ever met. I'm sending you and another reporter on a 5-day trip to get the story. You leave first thing tomorrow.
Which reporter?
Me!
At that moment, Tej entered. My stomach dropped. Not Tej! He was my ex-boyfriend, and things hadn't ended well between us. You're sending Tej into the forest. Tej, who needs his fluffy bunny slippers, a bubble bath, and a glass of wine every afternoon to wind down from the day. That Tej.
If you have a problem with Tej, I could get another intern to cover this story.
Tej will be fine. The next morning, Tej and I were on a boat on the way to the Malai forest.
This will be like old times.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Tisha, we have a chance here to create great memories.
We tried creating memories already, remember? But there was nothing great about them.
Maybe this time it will be different.
Tej tried to hold my hand, but I pulled away. There's a reason we didn't work out, Tej. Some relationships are just not meant to be. About an hour later, we docked at Malai and hiked the rest of the way. We walked for over an hour, and we were yet to spot the wild man.
How much further till we get there?
It's not like we have GPS. We'll get there when we get there. I wiped the sweat from my forehead as we pressed forward. The forest was hot, and my legs ached. If we didn't locate the wild man's house soon, I'd drop to the ground from sheer exhaustion. About 30 minutes later, Tej shouted,
Look, that must be it.
Tej and I quickened our step. 20 feet ahead of us stood a wooden hut with a thatched roof and front porch. On the porch stood 2 chairs. When we got to the hut, I knocked on the door and waited. After a few tries, no one answered the door.
I guess no one's at home.
Then we wait.
Since we have some time, maybe we could talk about us. Maybe rekindle the flame.
There is no us, and there will be no flames. Let's just wait in silence, shall we? Tej and I sat in the chairs and waited for the wild man to arrive. Sometime later, I felt someone shaking me. I opened my eyes to the most handsome man I'd ever seen. I recognized him from the picture Mr. Mandal gave me.
Are you lost?
No, we're not lost. We're actually looking for you. I quickly stood up and walked over to Tej, who was asleep, and woke him. I turned to the man and cleared my throat as Tej and I quickly produced our IDs from the publishing house. I'd like to interview you. The man grabbed my ID and looked at it critically. Our fingers touched, sending sparks throughout my body.
I recognize that company logo. Someone from that company came here a few months ago. He tried to pressure me into admitting that I was banished by people and forced to live in the forest like a wild man. If you're anything like him, I don't want to speak to you.
Please, we've got... My plea fell on deaf ears as the man stepped inside and closed the door behind him. I didn't come all this way to be rejected. I needed this man's story. I knocked on the door. Please, we'd just like to tell your story. I continued to knock on the door until I heard deep growls coming from behind me. I grabbed Tasia's arm. Did you hear that?
I didn't hear any.
Tasia stopped mid-sentence as the volume of the growls increased. We both pressed our backs against the hut as two tigers slowly emerged from the bushes.
Help! Somebody help us!
Tears rolled down my cheeks and my body trembled. Was this how I was going to die? Mauled by tigers? Suddenly, the man's front door swung open and he sprung in front of Tasia and me. His back arched and his fists clenched as a low growl rippled from his throat. It looked as though he was challenging the tigers. After what seemed like an eternity, the two tigers licked their lips, turned around, and walked back into the forest. I sighed with relief, but the tears still flowed. I felt as though my knees were about to collapse beneath me.
Are you okay?
Yes, thank you.
I'm okay too, in case anyone wanted to know. Why do you live in this miserable place?
I glared at Tasia.
The forest isn't safe. You should leave.
Please, we've come all this way to get your story. The wild man considered our request, and thankfully, he agreed.
You can get my story on one condition.
What's that?
Get to know me through my lifestyle. I tried that one time with her, and it didn't work.
I glared at Tasia. Maybe it wasn't the lifestyle that bothered me, Tasia. I turned to the wild man. Lifestyle it is. By the way, I'm Atisha, and this is Tasia.
I'm Dev.
Dev led Tasia and me into his hut. Inside it was small, but clean. Shelves lined the walls, and there was a makeshift sink by a window. In the middle of the hut were two more chairs like the ones outside. And on one side of the room, there was a cot and a small table.
I apologize if my home is not what you are accustomed to. How could you live in this cramped and awful home? I feel like a monkey in a cage.
I shot Tasia a disgusted look before I turned my attention to Dev. You have nothing to apologize for. Dev flashed me a smile and my heart melted.
Both of you should get some rest because we have a long day tomorrow.
After breakfast the next day, Dev took Tasia and me into the forest where he climbed trees and got a variety of fruits. Then he carried us by a stream to hunt for fish. Dev gave me the spear.
Don't overthink it. When you step into the water, let your instinct run free.
I stepped into the water and the salmon swam close to my feet. Dev came behind me and showed me how to hold the spear correctly. I still felt the heat from his hand on mine, even when he stepped away to let me spear the salmon myself. I waited a few minutes, then I thrust the spear into the water. I lifted the spear, and at the end was a salmon! I did it! I did it!
Well done! I love a woman who catches her own food.
The way I remember it, you love a woman who also has long legs and takes her orders at restaurants. I turned to Dev. Shall we continue? Over the next 2 days, I took notes on Dev. While I was drinking it all in, Tasia wasn't having fun at all. By the end of the second day, he had seen enough and he blew up on Dev in the hut.
How can you live like this? This lifestyle is for wild animals who don't have basic knowledge and education and thrive on violence.
Tasia, you jerk! The only wild animal I see here is you!
Atisha, don't tell me you're picking up for this uneducated beast.
Tasia! Leave now!
I'm not leaving you alone with this caveman.
Tasia pulled me aside and whispered,
You know I still have feelings for you. I can't bear to leave you alone with the likes of him. Atisha, I love you.
Well, Tasia, take those little feelings of yours and that love you have and pack them in your bag and leave. Now! Tasia looked as though he was about to say something but decided against it. I watched as Tasia gathered his things and a few minutes later, he walked out of the hut. I turned to Dev. Are you okay?
I'm okay, but you didn't need to send your boyfriend away.
Tasia was my boyfriend a long time ago. He's no longer relevant in my life. I had 2 more days to spend with Dev, and I wanted to make the most of them. The next 2 days were amazing. It would be hard not to miss it once I left. The last afternoon together, we decided to go to the river, where we bathed in the cool, clear waters and then laid on the grass and looked into the starry sky. In that moment, nothing else mattered. It was here Dev told me about his parents.
The reason I live out here is because this is where my parents and I used to stay when we visited the forest. My parents helped preserve the wildlife. But then, one day, my life changed drastically. I remember it like yesterday. Mom was washing up the dishes and Dad was sitting next to me helping me with my homework.
Adesh, something is outside. Dev's dad got up from the table to look out the window, which was located above the sink.
Stay hidden. While I was in the trunk, there was a lot of chaos for a while, then things were calm. I thought my parents would have come back for me, but they didn't. I spent 2 days in that chest. After that, I was forced to survive on my own. I chose to live this life to honor my parents' memory and walk in their footsteps.
Dev, I'm so sorry for your loss. It must have been so hard for you.
It was. When that reporter came around asking questions and forcing me to admit to things that weren't true, it was just too much. After what the reporter said in the article after meeting me, travelers got scared and ran away when they saw me. I felt like I was banished by people. These types of experiences make it hard to open up to others.
I admire you for overcoming your fear and opening up to me. Thank you for letting me get to know who you really are.
I should be thankful as well. You wanted to find out the truth and you stayed here and learned about my life.
I promise I'll give justice to your story, and I promise I'll come back for you if you let me. The next morning was bittersweet as I hugged Dev goodbye. While on the boat, I thought about him and the precious moments we spent together. I didn't believe it was possible to miss one person so much. Once I arrived home, I immediately began to write Dev's story. Dev wasn't feral and uncivilized. He was charming, hardworking, and caring. After a few hours, I was finally finished and ready to submit my article to Mr. Mandel. I couldn't wait for Mr. Mandel to see it. It was the best article I'd ever written. Early the next morning, I arrived at work and met Mr. Mandel in his office. Good morning, Mr. Mandel. Here is the article you requested. I handed Mr. Mandel all my original documents and notes that I had taken on the trip.
Thank you, Atisha. I've been anxiously waiting for this.
Mr. Mandel read the article while I waited. The smile on his face was replaced by a frown.
What is this nonsense? You spent 5 days in the forest with the wild man and you come back and hand me this garbage? You were supposed to write how uncivilized and feral this wild man is, not some sappy tragic story.
But Mr. Mandel, that isn't the truth. He isn't uncivilized and feral.
I don't care about the truth. All I care about is what sells.
I couldn't believe he was being so unethical. Then it dawned on me. Mr. Mandel was the reporter who ruined Dev's life. It was you! You're the one who spread the rumors and made Dev's life a living hell.
So what? I gave you a story and all you had to do was write what I told you to write.
Mr. Mandel stopped and looked at me strangely before he continued.
Holy cow, Tej was right. You're totally in love with that wild animal.
You're the animal here!
I'm willing to give you another shot to change the angle of the story.
With all due respect, Mr. Mandel, I'm not changing Dev's story.
How dare you defy me? You're nothing but an inexperienced intern, that's what you are. If you won't change the script, then I will. You're fired.
No, Mr. Mandel, I quit! I can't work for a cowardly tyrant! I walked out of Mr. Mandel's office and slammed the door. I quickly gathered my stuff and walked out of the building. Later that night, I realized I'd left all my notes and documentation with Mr. Mandel. I promised Dev I'd get his story, so I opened my laptop and got to work. I published a new article on my blog, exposing the unethical wrongdoings of Mr. Mandel and his publishing company. By the next day, my blog had become viral, and I received phone calls from different media houses inviting me to a press conference with Mr. Mandel to clear the air. I agreed to the interview, and 2 days later, Mr. Mandel and I each stood at a podium surrounded by media houses.
Let's just get something straight here. Atisha is holding a grudge because she lacked the professionalism needed to be a successful intern. Do you really believe her frivolous nonsense written in that insignificant blog of hers? My publishing company has been around for decades and is trusted by thousands.
Dev is not the uncivilized, feral person Mr. Mandel has made him out to be.
In your notes, you wrote that this Dev character growled at 2 tigers and chased them back into the forest, correct?
That's taken out of context.
What did you mean, Atisha? Are you changing your story?
The more I spoke, the more Mr. Mandel twisted my words. People in the crowd began booing at me. This was not how I wanted this to turn out. I was on the verge of tears when a familiar voice rang out from the crowd.
She's telling the truth.
I watched as everyone in the crowd turned to see who spoke. It was Dev! He moved from the back of the crowd and made his way to the podium and stood next to me. People in the crowd chatted to each other. They recognized him from his photos.
Atisha was the one who journeyed to Malai to find the truth, and she did. Mr. Mandel, a few months ago, came to see me, but when he came, he wanted me to admit to things that weren't true. And when I refused to give him what he wanted, he began to spread false rumors about who and what I am. Letitia came, heard my story, and now the truth is out there for all who choose to see it.
I watched as the crowd targeted Mr. Mandel.
Mr. Mandel, word on the street is that your publishing company is going bankrupt. Did you create a story to save your company? How many more stories did you spin the truth about, Mr. Mandel?
One after another, the reporters kept their questions coming until Mr. Mandel ran off the stage with the reporters rushing after him, leaving Dev and me alone. I turned to Dev. Dev, what are you doing here?
I couldn't wait for you to come back to me, so I came for you. I showed you my world. Now I'm ready to see yours.
Dev held my waist and pulled me close. I wrapped my arms around his neck, and we kissed. Oh my God, he's coming over! My eyes lit up excitedly as the cutest guy I'd ever seen made his way over to me.
Hey, beautiful.
He flashed me a dazzling smile that made my knees buckle. Hey! Out of nowhere, Dad appeared and threw me over his shoulder like a sack of potatoes, while Mom gave the poor guy a piece of her mind.
How dare you speak to our princess? Shoo, you little riffraff. Shoo.
Hi, my name is Faith, and I'm from Suriname. Please like and subscribe to our channel. I was born to the most awful parents ever! Both my parents were famous scientists and enjoyed portraying us as the perfect family on social media, but in real life, my parents were totally ruining my life with their controlling ways. Like whenever I stepped out of the house, even just to go to the game corner where all of the teenagers hung out, my parents were on me like pollen on a bee.
I heard she has a disease, so her parents go everywhere with her. She's so weird.
It was so embarrassing. Then, on my 7th birthday, Mom brought me my first set of Enid Blyton books, which I immediately fell in love with. Just to read my books, I would find a spot in the garden and fantasized being one of the characters. Until one day, while drawn into my adventure, I noticed a boy in the garden watering the rose bush. I was so mesmerized by how cute he was that I tripped and fell into the manure. I was horrified.
Are you okay?
Thank you. Before I could say anything else, Mom came yelling like a maniac.
Faith! What are you doing? Mingling with the house help? You get back to work.
I'm not a child anymore! I should be able to talk to whoever I choose! Ugh! I hate it here! I stormed off. The next day, my heart fluttered when I noticed a single rose on the bench where I'd sit down to read. I decided to leave a thank you note for him, where Mom and Dad would never think of looking. The following day, I checked to see if my note was gone, and it was! A new note from the gardener was in its place. He signed the note, Isaiah. Over the next 2 weeks, Isaiah and I exchanged letters. He told me that he grew up in foster care and wrote all about the adventures he had growing up. I told him about my controlling parents and how I wished I had a normal life. One evening, my parents and I were at an award ceremony when I saw Isaiah there dressed as a waiter. My parents didn't notice when I slipped away to speak with Isaiah. Hi there, I didn't know you're a waiter.
I'm not. My cousin couldn't make it to work, so he asked me to take his shift.
Do you think that maybe we can upgrade from our letters and hang out sometime? A male voice from behind me spoke up and I spun around.
You want to hang out with him? Look at him. His clothes look washed out. And look at that hole in his shoe.
The boy pointed at Isaiah and laughed. Angered by his behavior, I pushed him to the ground. Don't you dare make fun of my friend! My sudden outburst turned the heads of some of the guests, including my parents, who rushed over. Needless to say, my parents apologized. We left the event early, and I spent the rest of the afternoon in my bedroom. About a week later, my parents hosted a dinner for the Whitlock family. I was annoyed when I realized their son, Finn Whitlock, was the guy who made fun of Isaiah at the event a few days ago. Mom spent most of the dinner praising Finn and laughing at all of Mr. Whitlock's corny jokes.
Hey, darling. Did you know Finn will be following in his parents' footsteps and become a surgeon?
I hope he becomes a brain surgeon because someone obviously needs their brain fixed.
We didn't come here to be insulted.
Then leave. Actually, you stay. I'll leave. I'm tired of this dinner party anyway. I stood up and marched into the garden. I sat on the bench, and Finn sat next to me. Look, despite whatever lies my mother told you, I'm not interested in you. I stood up to walk away when Finn stood up and blocked my path. Let go of me! Suddenly, Finn was on the ground, and Isaiah pounced on him like a guard dog. I silently watched as the guys wrestled on the ground, secretly rooting for Isaiah.
What in the world is going on here?
Dad and Mr. Whitlock pulled the guys apart.
I was sitting here, talking to Faith, when this hooligan tried to rob me.
What? He's lying! Isaiah was protecting me!
I've heard enough from you tonight, young lady. Get to bed now. As for you, you're fired.
I'll see you again, Isaiah. They can't hold me as their hostage forever. As Isaiah was being escorted from the grounds, I ran to my room. It was high time I exposed them for who they really were. I took to social media and told everyone about how horrible my parents treated me over the years and how I felt like a prisoner in my own home. But nothing prepared me for the comments I received.
You should be grateful to have famous parents who love you and spend time with you and not leave you with nannies.
You kids are all the same. It's always about what you want. You're so selfish.
Seriously, your parents give you the best of everything. I'd love to be in your shoes for one day.
Ugh! What did they know anyway? About 30 minutes later, I walked into the kitchen to get some juice, and when I entered, there stood Mr. Whitlock and Mom.
I'll get the formula as requested. Do you have the money?
I watched as Mr. Whitlock opened the briefcase in his hand.
Are you sure the formula is completed and it'll work?
Mom nodded her head.
Great. Ensure this deal stays between the both of us. If it leaks, we'll both be ruined.
Mom! How could you betray Dad like this? Mr. Whitlock and Mom looked at each other, then looked at me shocked. I ran to my room and locked the door. Shortly after, Mom knocked on the door, begging me to open up, but I didn't. I didn't want to stay in that house one more night. I had to break out. Once my parents fell asleep, I took the money from the safe, about $50,000. I stuffed my passport, ID, and some clothing into my knapsack. I used my rideshare app and snuck out of the house. I waited on the curb until the car pulled up. I hopped in and told the driver I wanted to be dropped off at Radisson Hotel. I was so consumed with my phone that I didn't realize the driver had taken me in the opposite direction, into a bad part of town. When the car stopped, I looked up. This isn't Radisson Hotel!
No, it isn't. But this is your stop.
The man grabbed my bag and pushed me out of the car. I stumbled onto the road and slammed my head against the pavement as the car sped away. I lay there dazed for a few minutes before I stood up. There I was out in the cold, with no money, no phone, and I had no idea where I was. It couldn't get any worse. As I walked along the lonely road, I heard a familiar voice behind me.
Faith, what are you doing here?
I ran away.
You did what? Let's get inside before you catch a cold.
Isaiah quickly led me to an adorable 2-bedroom cottage. He gave me some dry clothes to change into while he made us some hot chocolate. A few minutes later, we sat on the sofa as I explained everything.
Well, what are you gonna do with your newfound freedom?
I'd like to explore the city.
I can help with that.
Isaiah smiled at me and my heart melted. Over the next few days, I disguised myself as Isaiah and I explored the city. We went to museums, parks, and malls. It was so refreshing not to have my parents breathing down my neck. One night, while coming home from sightseeing, Isaiah held my hand and I didn't pull away. But all good things must come to an end. About a week after I ran away, my face was plastered on every major television station. My parents were offering a reward of $50,000 for my safe return. Oh my God! What am I going to do?
You'll have to stay low until we figure out what to do.
I sighed. I knew Isaiah was right. Around midnight, I got up to use the bathroom, and I heard whispers in the living room. I peeked. Isaiah was talking to a frail-looking girl who looked a few years older than me.
All I have to do is hand Faith over to her parents, and the $500,000 is mine.
What? You're turning me in? Stunned, Isaiah and the girl turned to look at me. I felt like a volcano about to erupt. I was furious. You are such a traitor! I thought we were in this together!
Faith, please, let me explain.
I ran out of the house and never looked back. He wasn't going to get away with this. I walked into a cell phone store, stole a phone, and walked out of the store. Once outside, I called Mom's cell phone. If you tell anyone I called, I'll post about your kiss with Mr. Whitlock on social media. Put $2 million in a large duffel bag and place it in the storm pipe on the easterly side of Goodwood Park in 30 minutes. Come alone. I hung up, tossed the phone into the garbage, and headed to the park. About 30 minutes later, I watched Mom place the duffel bag into the storm drain and walked away. Close by was a homeless man. I told him I'd pay him $100 if he retrieved the bag from the storm pipe for me. He agreed. I watched nervously as the man went to the storm pipe and removed the bag. I expected police to surround him and a helicopter to hover above him like in the movies, but none of that happened. I breathed a sigh of relief as with each step, the man came closer to me. Then, the man did something I didn't expect him to do. He opened the bag! He looked in my direction, closed it back up, hugged the bag, and ran in the opposite direction. Oh, no! I chased the man through the park, and after a few minutes, grabbed the bag from his pudgy fingers and escaped from the park. I purchased a fake ID, passport, and a plane ticket and hopped on the next flight leaving the country. While on the plane, I thumbed through my parents' social media pages. It actually worked! I watched as condolences poured out from friends and family for my parents' loss. Then, I heard something that stopped my heart as I listened to an interview with Mom and Dad.
It must be difficult having lost 2 children.
2?
Yes. Our first daughter, Marcy, was kidnapped on a field trip when she was just 5 years old.
We vowed that if we ever had another child, we'd protect him or her, and they'd never leave our sight, but...
Mom burst into tears. Everything I thought about Mom and Dad was wrong. They weren't controlling me. They were just protecting me. I knew what I needed to do. As soon as the plane landed, I booked another ticket and headed home. About 42 hours later, I stood outside the front door of my parents' home and knocked nervously. When they opened the door, their eyes lit up.
Faith, you're alive.
Mom and Dad hugged me. Dad ushered me inside. I'm so sorry for what I did. I hope you can forgive me.
We do, darling. We're just so glad you're home.
Why didn't you ever tell me about my sister?
It's a painful part of our past that we decided to leave in the past.
Maybe it's time to start looking again. That night, my parents and I had a lengthy discussion about moving forward as a family. They promised to give me more space if I promised never to run away again. Later that night, Mom came into my room.
About what you saw with Mr. Whitlock?
Mom, you need to tell Dad or I will. What you did affects him. Sure enough, a few days later, Mom did tell Dad and he was furious. He loved Mom. They decided to seek counseling to work through it. Over the next few months, my parents and I sought the help of the best private investigators in the country. And finally, we had a breakthrough which led us to Southern Medical Hospital, room 868. I inhaled deeply as my parents knocked on the door, pushed it slowly, then stepped into the room. When I stepped into the room, my jaw dropped. Laying on the bed was the frail-looking girl from Isaiah's apartment, and Isaiah sat on a chair next to her bedside. What are you doing here?
This is my foster sister. What are you doing here?
Isaiah, can we speak with you for a moment outside, please?
In the hallway, we told Isaiah that Macy was my sister, and she was taken when she was only 5. Isaiah told us that he had met Macy in foster care when she was about 10 years old, and they've been inseparable ever since.
I needed the money to pay for Macy's medical bills. I come here every night to check on her.
What's wrong with her?
She has a rare blood disorder. I needed money so she could see a specialist abroad. So that's why your parents and I made the deal. The doctor said she doesn't have long again.
I had just found my sister, and now I was going to lose her all over again? Why didn't you continue to search for her? If we found her sooner, the doctors could have saved her.
Blaming your parents isn't going to change what happened.
We've wasted enough time already. All I want to do is spend time with my baby girl.
Over the next few days, Mom and Dad paid off Macy's hospital bills. She moved in with us.
I really do hope that you like it here, honey. I've missed you so much.
The next few months were filled with joy and laughter as my parents, Macy and I visited new places, ate new food, and took tons of pictures. Macy and I had so much in common. We loved the same music, we loved reading, and we heckled Mom and Dad when we needed some space. Then, early one morning, Mom and Dad rushed into my room.
We found a specialist willing to see Macy immediately.
Great! So let's go!
We already sent her ahead. She's in great hands. We'll fly out to meet her tonight.
Later that afternoon, I went to the garden and on the bench was an envelope. I looked at the envelope, which had my name scribbled on. It was Macy's handwriting. My fingers trembled as I tore open the envelope.
Dear Faith, spending time with you over the last few months has been priceless. and I can't wait to create more memories when I return. Mom and Dad did a great job as you've grown into a beautiful, loving, intelligent young lady. You're an amazing little sister. P.S. Isaiah has something to ask you. Please forgive him as you forgave me. Mom and Dad have already given their blessing. I love you, Faith. Now, forever, and always. Love, your big sister, Macy.
When I looked up, Isaiah stood before me with a single rose in his hand.
Faith, I'm sorry that I wasn't honest before. I'll never lie to you again. Can you forgive me?
I smiled and nodded.
Also, will you be my girlfriend?
I nodded my head happily as my tears of sorrow turned into tears of joy. Isaiah pulled me into a kiss.